Princess Valara Sinkith stood on the balcony of her private chambers and watched the twin sun set over the golden spires of the imperial palace. 6 months had passed since her wedding day. 6 months since she had given her hand to a human male she had never met before. That morning, she remembered the whispers of the court, the pitying glances from her sisters, the barely hidden disgust on Commander Kithros's face as he watched her walk toward the altar where a human stood, waiting. Nathan Cole, her husband. She turned the word over in her mind and found it still felt strange. Wrong somehow. Like wearing clothes that did not fit. The marriage had been necessary. Everyone agreed on this point. The war between the Althrani Empire and the human coalition had claimed millions of lives on both sides. Neither species could afford to continue fighting. A political union between their ruling families would bind them together and force peace upon two peoples who had forgotten how to trust each other. Valara had volunteered. She was the eldest daughter, and duty ran deep in her blood. Her father, Emperor Sinkith, had wept when she told him her decision. He had called her brave. He had called her a true daughter of the Empire. She had not felt brave. She had felt hollow. The door behind her opened softly, and she did not need to turn to know who had entered. She had learned to recognize his footsteps over these past months. Light, careful, always careful, as if he was afraid of disturbing her. "The evening meal is ready," Nathan said. His voice was gentle, as it always was. "Ambassador Hayes sent word that he will join us tonight. He wants to discuss the summit on Helix Prime." Valara finally turned to look at him. Her husband stood near the doorway, dressed in simple human clothing. He was tall for his species, but still shorter than most Althrani males. His hair was dark, his eyes a warm brown color that reminded her of tree bark after rain. There was nothing remarkable about him, nothing that would make anyone look twice. This was what confused her most. The humans had sent her a warrior. She had read his file before the wedding. Nathan Cole had served with distinction in something called the Titan Rebellions. He had medals and commendations that filled 2 pages of text. He had been, according to the documents, one of Earth's finest soldiers, but the man who stood before her showed none of that. He smiled easily. He spoke softly. He spent his days learning Althrani customs and practicing their language with the palace servants. He had never raised his voice in anger. He had never demanded anything from her, not even the basic intimacies that a husband might expect from his wife. He was kind. She could admit that much. He was patient and thoughtful and unfailingly polite, but kindness was not strength. Patience was not power. The Althrani respected warriors who proved themselves through combat and conquest. Nathan Cole proved nothing except that humans were soft creatures who smiled too much. "I will be there shortly," Valara said. Nathan nodded and turned to leave. Then he paused at the door. "Valara?" She raised an eyebrow. "The garden flowers you mentioned last week," he said. "The ones your mother used to grow. I found some seeds in the market district. I planted them this morning near the southern fountain. I thought you might like that." He left before she could respond. Valara stood alone on the balcony and felt something twist in her chest. It was not love. She was certain of that. But it was something close to guilt, and she did not know what to do with it. The evening meal was a formal affair, as it always was when Ambassador Daniel Hayes visited the palace. The human diplomat was older than Nathan, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He had been the one to arrange the marriage alliance, and he checked on its progress regularly. "The summit on Helix Prime will be crucial," Hayes explained as servants brought dishes of roasted meat and steamed vegetables. 12 species will attend. The Verax Dominion has requested a seat at the table, which concerns me greatly. "The Verax are conquerors," Valara said. "They do not negotiate. they demand. Exactly why we need a united front, Hayes replied. The Human-Althrani alliance must appear strong and unshakable. Any sign of weakness and the Verax will exploit it. Valara glanced at Nathan. He was eating quietly, his attention seemingly focused on his food. But she noticed the way his eyes moved around the room, checking the positions of the guards, noting the exits. It was subtle. She might have missed it if she had not been watching him. Strange behavior for a man who spent his mornings planting flowers. The doors to the dining hall burst open, and Commander Kithris strode in without announcement. He was everything Nathan was not. Tall, broad, armored in ceremonial plate that displayed his military rank. His presence filled the room like a storm cloud. "Princess," Kithros said, offering a shallow bow that bordered on disrespect. "I have returned from the border patrols. The Emperor has granted me leave to attend the summit as your military escort." His eyes moved to Nathan with open contempt. "Unless, of course, your human believes he can protect you himself." The insult hung in the air like poison. Valara waited for Nathan to respond. To defend his honor, to show some spark of the warrior his file claimed him to be. Nathan simply smiled. "Commander Kithros, it is good to see you again. Your presence at the summit will be most welcome. Princess Valara's safety is our shared priority, and I appreciate your dedication to her protection." Kithros blinked. He had expected anger. He had wanted a confrontation. Instead, he received courtesy so perfect that it left no room for further attack. The commander's jaw tightened. "We leave for Helix Prime in 3 days. I suggest you prepare yourself, human. The galaxy is not as forgiving as this palace." He turned and left without waiting for dismissal. Ambassador Hayes released a slow breath. "Well handled, Nathan." Valara said nothing. She watched her husband return to his meal as if nothing had happened, and she felt the familiar weight of disappointment settle over her. She had married a man who would not fight. In a galaxy where strength meant survival, she had bound herself to someone who answered insults with smiles. She wondered, not for the first time, if she had made a terrible mistake, but deep in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered a question she could not answer. If Nathan Cole was truly weak, why did Ambassador Hayes look at him with such complete trust? Why did the servants speak of him with quiet admiration? And why, when Kithros had burst through those doors, had Nathan's hand moved toward his hip as if reaching for a weapon that was not there? Valara pushed the thoughts away and focused on her meal. 3 days until Helix Prime. 3 days until the summit that would determine the future of two empires. She had no idea that it would also reveal the truth about the quiet man she had married. Helix Prime Station hung in the darkness between stars like a jewel made of metal and light. It was neutral ground, claimed by no empire, governed by an independent council that answered to no single species. 12 races had sent delegations to this summit, and the station's corridors buzzed with languages and customs from across the galaxy. Valara stepped off the transport ship and felt the weight of 100 eyes upon her. She was a princess of the Althrani Empire, tall and graceful, her silver hair braided in the traditional style of her house. She walked with the confidence of her station. Nathan walked beside her, dressed in a simple dark suit that human diplomats preferred. He carried no visible weapons. He wore no armor. To the aliens watching their arrival, he must have looked like a servant rather than a prince consort. Commander Kithros followed 3 steps behind, his armored form a stark contrast to Nathan's modest appearance. Several Althrani warriors flanked them, along with a small team of human security personnel that Ambassador Hayes had insisted upon. The Verax delegation arrived this morning, Hayes said quietly as they walked toward their assigned quarters. They brought twice as many soldiers as any other species. The council is concerned, but unwilling to act. The Verax test boundaries, Valara replied. It is their nature. She noticed Nathan scanning the corridors as they walked. His eyes moved constantly, checking corners, examining faces in the crowd, noting the positions of security cameras. He did this with such smooth efficiency that someone watching casually would never notice. But Valara was not watching casually. She had begun paying closer attention to her husband since that night in the dining hall. She had started seeing small things she had missed before. The way he always positioned himself between her and any door. The way he mapped every room within seconds of entering. The way his body, beneath those soft civilian clothes, moved with a balance and control that spoke of years of physical training. You are nervous, she said to him as they entered their quarters. Nathan looked at her with mild surprise. I am cautious. There is a difference. You have been watching everyone since we arrived. Old habits, he said, and there was something in his voice that made her pause. Something old and tired and carefully hidden. She wanted to ask more, but a knock at the door interrupted them. One of the human security officers entered and handed Nathan a small communication device. Encrypted message from Earth, sir, the officer said. Priority channel. Nathan took the device and glanced at the screen. His expression did not change, but Valara saw his shoulders tense for just a moment before relaxing again. Thank you, Sergeant. That will be all. When they were alone, Valara asked, What was that? Old friends checking in, Nathan said. He slipped the device into his pocket and offered her a small smile. Nothing to worry about. She did not believe him. The formal dinner that evening brought all 12 delegations together in the station's grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and tables were arranged in a great circle to symbolize equality among the species present. Valara sat beside Nathan at the human Althrani table. Commander Kithra stood nearby with the guards, his eyes constantly moving over the crowd. Ambassador Hayes engaged in polite conversation with delegates from the Meridian Collective, a peaceful trading species known for their diplomatic skills. The Verax delegation occupied the far end of the hall. They were massive creatures, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with thick gray skin and 4 arms that ended in clawed hands. Their leader, a commander called Grath, wore ceremonial armor covered in the symbols on his conquest's dot. As the evening progressed, Grath rose from his seat and approached the human Althrani table. The room grew quiet. Princess Valara, Grath said, his deep voice carrying across the hall, I must congratulate you on your marriage. It takes great courage to bind yourself to such a humble species. The insult was clear to everyone present. Valara felt her face grow hot with anger. The humans are our valued allies, she replied carefully. Our alliance has brought peace and prosperity to both our peoples. Grath laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Peace, yes, that is what the weak call surrender. He turned his gaze to Nathan. And this is your husband? The great human warrior I have heard so much about? Nathan met the Verax commander's eyes without flinching. I am Nathan Cole. It is an honor to meet you, Commander Grath. Your reputation precedes you, does it? Grath leaned closer, his massive form towering over Nathan's seated position. Then you know that the Verax do not respect cowards who hide behind treaties and political marriages. We respect only strength. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Nathan smiled. It was the same polite smile he always wore. But Valara saw something flicker behind his eyes. Something cold and sharp that disappeared so quickly she might have imagined it. I understand completely, Nathan said. The Verax way is admirable in its clarity. Strength deserves respect. I hope that during this summit, we can find common ground despite our different approaches. Grath stared at Nathan for a long moment, clearly searching for weakness. When he found nothing to exploit, He grunted and returned to his table. Ambassador Hayes released a breath he had been holding. "Nicely done." Valara said nothing. She was watching her husband's hands. They rested calmly on the table, completely still. No trembling. No sign of fear or anger. Complete control. That night, Valara could not sleep. She walked through the station's observation deck, watching ships come and go against the backdrop of distant stars. She found Nathan there before her. He stood alone at the viewing window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. He had not noticed her yet, and for the first time she saw him without his mask of pleasant courtesy. His face was hard. His eyes were distant. He stood perfectly still, but there was tension in every line of his body, like a coiled spring waiting to release. This was not the gentle husband who planted flowers and learned servants' names. This was someone else entirely. She must have made a sound because Nathan turned suddenly. For one heartbeat, she saw something dangerous in his gaze. Then it was gone, replaced by his familiar warm expression. "Valara, I did not expect you to be awake." "I could not sleep," she said. "You look troubled." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "I have learned to trust my instincts over the years. They have kept me alive when nothing else could." "And what do your instincts tell you now?" He looked back at the stars. "That something bad is coming, and that we are running out of time." Before she could respond, alarms began to scream throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors. A voice came over the communication system, tight with panic. "Alert. All personnel. Unidentified warships approaching the station. Repeat. Unidentified warships approaching. All delegates proceed to secure locations immediately." Nathan moved before the announcement finished. He grabbed Valara's arm and pulled her toward the door. "Stay close to me," he said, and his voice was different now, harder, commanding. "Do exactly what I say. Do you understand?" Valara nodded, too shocked to argue. "Good. Let's move." They ran into the corridor as the station shook from the first impact of enemy fire. The Verax had made their move. The station shook again as another blast struck the outer hull. Emergency lights painted the corridors in shades of red and shadow. Screams echoed from somewhere distant, mixed with the sharp sounds of weapons fire. Nathan moved through the chaos like water flowing around stones. His grip on Valara's hand was firm but not painful, guiding her through crowds of panicked delegates and station personnel. "This way," he said, pulling her into a side corridor. "The main routes will be compromised first." "How do you know that?" Valara asked. "Because that is what I would do." They rounded a corner and nearly collided with Ambassador Hayes and a squad of human security officers. The ambassador's face was pale but composed. "Nathan, thank God. We need to reach the emergency shuttles on level 7. Understood." Nathan turned to the security team. "Sergeant Miller, take point. 2x2 formation. Check corners before proceeding." "We move fast but careful." The soldiers responded instantly, arranging themselves with practiced efficiency. Valara watched with growing amazement. Nathan had given orders like a man who had done it 1,000 times before, and the soldiers obeyed without hesitation. They made it through 2 more corridors before they encountered the enemy. 4 Verax soldiers appeared at the intersection ahead. They were massive, armored in battle plate, carrying weapons that looked heavy enough to crush bone. When they saw the human group, they raised their guns. "Get down!" Nathan shouted. He pushed Valara behind a support pillar as energy blasts tore through the air where she had been standing. The human soldiers returned fire, but the Verax armor was thick. The shots barely slowed them. One of the Verax charged forward, closing the distance with terrifying speed. He swung his clawed arm at Sergeant Miller, who barely dodged in time. Nathan moved. Valara had never seen anything like it. One moment he was beside her, crouched behind cover. The next, he was in the middle of the fight, moving so fast he seemed to blur. He ducked under the Verax soldier's swing, stepped inside his guard, and struck 3 times in rapid succession. Each blow landed at a joint in the armor, at gaps in the protection that should have been too small to target. The Verax stumbled. Nathan grabbed his arm, twisted, and used the creature's own momentum to throw him into the wall. The impact cracked the metal paneling. A second Verax came at him from behind. Nathan spun, dropped low, and swept the creature's legs. As it fell, he drove his elbow into its throat with enough force to crush the WINDPIP down in less than 5 seconds. The remaining Verax soldiers hesitated. They had expected easy prey. They had not expected this. Nathan did not give them time to recover. He picked up a fallen weapon, checked its charge with a single glance, and fired twice. Both shots found their marks, striking the weak points where helmet met neck armor. Silence fell over the corridor. Nathan stood among the bodies, breathing hard but controlled. He turned to check on the others, and his eyes found Valara. "Are you hurt?" She could not find words. She could only stare at the man she had married, the man she had thought was weak, the man she had pitied for his softness. He had killed 4 Verax warriors in the time it took her to draw a breath. He had moved like a predator, like something ancient and deadly that wore human skin. Valara. Nathan stepped closer, his voice softening. "Are you hurt?" "No," she managed. "I am not hurt." "Good." He turned back to the group. "We keep moving. More will come." Commander Kithros found them 3 corridors later. The Althrani warrior was wounded, a deep gash across his arm, but he still stood tall. His squad had been scattered during the initial attack. "Princess," Kithros said, relief evident in his voice. Then his eyes fell on Nathan, and he saw the blood on the human's hands. "What happened?" "We encountered Verax soldiers," Ambassador Hayes explained. "Nathan dealt with them." Kithros stared at Nathan with new eyes. You killed Verax warriors?" "4 of them," Sergeant Miller said. There was awe in his voice. "I have never seen anyone move that fast. It was like watching something out of a training film." Nathan said nothing. He was scanning the corridor ahead, his focus already on the next threat. They continued toward level 7, but progress was slow. The Verax had flooded the station with soldiers. Twice more, they had to fight through enemy patrols, and each time Nathan led the way. Valara watched him cut through enemies like they were made of paper. He used whatever was available, weapons, his bare hands, the environment itself. He threw 1 Verax into an electrical panel, used another as a shield against incoming fire, and broke a third's neck with a move so fast she did not see how it happened. Between fights, he was calm. He checked on wounded team members, helped civilians they found hiding in storage rooms, and spoke in that same gentle voice she had grown accustomed to over 6 months of marriage. But in combat, he was something else entirely. Something terrifying and beautiful and utterly without mercy. Lady Miracole found them near the elevator banks. Nathan's younger sister had arrived at the station just the day before, and she had been separated from her escorts during the attack. "Nathan!" She ran to her brother and threw her arms around him. "Thank God you are alive." "I am fine, Mira." Nathan held her tightly for a moment before pulling back. "Stay close. We are almost to the shovels." Myra noticed the blood on his clothes and the bodies in the corridor behind them. Her face went pale, but she nodded without asking questions. Alara moved beside her as they continued walking. "You do not seem surprised by what your brother can do." Myra glanced at Nathan's back. "He does not talk about it. He never has. But I know what he did during the war. I know what it cost him." "What do you mean?" "Nathan was not always like this," Myra said quietly. "He used to laugh more. He used to be carefree. But war changes people. It takes things from them that can never be returned. She paused. He became what he needed to become to protect people, to protect our family. And when the war ended, he buried that part of himself because he did not want to be that person anymore. Velara looked at her husband, leading the group through the dangerous corridors with steady confidence. She thought of the man who planted flowers and learned servant names. She thought of the monster who killed Verax soldiers without hesitation. Both were real. Both were Nathan. An explosion ahead rocked the station, and smoke filled the corridor. Nathan held up his fist, signaling everyone to stop. "The route to the shuttles is blocked," he said after a moment of assessment. "We need to find another way. There is an auxiliary path through the main atrium," Commander Kithros offered. "But it will be heavily defended." Nathan nodded slowly. "Then we go through the atrium." He looked at the group, his eyes settling on each face in turn. "Stay behind me. Move when I tell you to move. Stop when I tell you to stop." He chambered around in his weapon and started forward. Velara followed her husband into the smoke, finally beginning to understand what kind of man she had married. The main atrium of Helix Prime was a vast circular space that served as the heart of the station. 3 levels of walkways surrounded a central floor where gardens and fountains had been designed to make visitors feel at peace. There was no peace now. Verax soldiers had taken control of the atrium. At least 20 of them stood guard, weapons ready, watching all entrances. In the center, surrounded by armed enemies, a group of hostages knelt on the ground with their hands bound behind their backs. Ambassador Hayes was among them. Nathan crouched behind a maintenance access point, studying the scene through a narrow gap in the wall. Velara was beside him, along with Commander Kithros, Myra, and the survivors of their group. 20 hostiles, Nathan said quietly. Heavy weapons. Good positions. They have covered all the main approaches. "We cannot fight through that," Kithros said. "Even with all of us together, the hostages would be killed before we reach them." "I know." Velara watched Nathan's face as he calculated. She could almost see his mind working, processing angles and distances and probabilities with machine-like precision. "There is another way," he said finally. "But I will need to go alone." "Alone?" Kithros nearly laughed. "Against 20 Verax. That is suicide." "Maybe." Nathan checked his weapon one last time. "But if we do nothing, the hostages die. If we attack together, the hostages die. This is the only option, Nathan." Myra grabbed her brother's arm. "Please, there has to be another way." He looked at his sister with gentle eyes. "There is not. And you know, I would not do this if there was." He turned to Commander Kithros. "If I fail, get the princes and the others to the shuttles. Do not come back for me." Kithros stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I misjudged you, human. I thought you were weak because you did not answer insults with violence. I thought kindness was the same as cowardice." He straightened his spine and pressed his fist to his chest in the traditional Althrani salute. "I was wrong. Go with honor, Nathan Cole." Nathan returned the gesture. Then he looked at Velara. She did not know what to say. 6 months of marriage, and she had never truly seen him until today. Now he was about to walk into certain death, and the only thing she could think was how much time she had wasted. "Be careful," she whispered. It was not enough, but it was all she had. Nathan smiled. It was not his polite diplomatic smile. It was something real and warm and sad. "I have been waiting 6 months to hear you say something like that." Then he was gone, moving through the shadows toward the atrium. Velara watched through the gap in the wall as her husband approached the killing ground. He moved differently now. Every step was deliberate. Every motion was controlled. He was no longer Nathan Cole, the quiet diplomat. He was something else. Something from the war that had shaped him. He entered the atrium through a ventilation shaft, dropping silently onto the second-level walkway. A Verax guard stood nearby, watching the hostages below. He never saw Nathan coming. Nathan struck from behind, one hand covering the guard's mouth, the other driving a blade into the gap between helmet and armor. The Verax dropped without a sound. One down. 19 to go. Nathan moved along the walkway, a shadow among shadows. He took down 2 more guards before anyone noticed something was wrong. By the time the first alarm was raised, 5 Verax lay dead. "Intruder!" someone shouted. Second level. The remaining Verax opened fire. Energy blasts tore through the air, shredding metal and shattering glass. Nathan dove behind a structural pillar, rolled, and came up firing. 2 more Verax fell. Then he was among them, moving too fast to track. He used the environment as a weapon, kicking enemies into each other, throwing one into the path of another's fire, using their own bulk against them in ways they could not counter. Valara had thought the earlier fights were impressive. This was something beyond that. This was art. Nathan flowed through the Verax like water through rocks. He did not fight with rage or hatred. He fought with cold, terrible efficiency. Every strike served a purpose. Every movement created an opening for the next attack. A Verax soldier grabbed him from behind, lifting him off the ground. Nathan twisted in the grip, drove his elbow into the creature's eye, and used the momentum of being released to spin into a kick that shattered another enemy's knee. He was bleeding now. A cut above his eye. A wound on his arm that stained his sleeve dark. But he did not slow down. 10 Verax remained. Then 7. Then 4. Commander Grath emerged from behind a pillar, roaring with fury. The Verax leader was enormous, even larger than his soldiers. He swung a massive fist at Nathan's head. Nathan ducked under the blow and struck 3 times at Grath's knee. The joint buckled, but the Verax remained standing through sheer will. "You are nothing," Grath snarled. "A weak human playing at being a warrior." Nathan did not respond with words. He responded with action. He caught Grath's next punch, redirected the force, and drove his palm into the commander's throat. As Grath staggered, Nathan swept his injured leg and sent him crashing to the ground. Before the Verax could rise, Nathan was on top of him, his blade at the creature's throat. "Yield," Nathan said. His voice was calm, almost quiet. "Your attack has failed. Your soldiers are dead. Yield, and I will spare your life." Grath stared up at the human with something like disbelief. "Why? We would have shown you no mercy." "I know, but I am not you." Nathan pressed the blade just enough to draw blood. "Yield." For a long moment, Grath was silent. Then, slowly, he let his arms fall to his sides. "I yield." Nathan stood up, keeping his weapon ready. Around him, the atrium was silent. Bodies lay everywhere. The hostages stared with wide eyes, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Ambassador Hayes rose to his feet, his bindings cut by one of the freed delegates. "Nathan, good God." Nathan did not respond. He was looking at his hands, covered in blood that was not entirely his own. His expression was unreadable. Valara ran into the atrium before Kithros could stop her. She crossed the distance between them and stopped in front of her husband, searching his face for the man she knew. He looked at her, and she saw exhaustion beneath the warrior's mask. She saw pain and something that might have been shame. "Are you hurt?" she asked. He almost laughed. It was a broken sound. "That is my question. I asked you that after the first fight. Now I am asking you." Nathan was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I am hurt, but I will live." Valara reached out and took his hand. The blood was warm against her palm. The blood was warm against her palm. She did not let go. "Come," she said softly. "Let me clean your wounds." She led him away from the carnage. And for the first time since their wedding day, he led her. Behind them, Commander Kithros stood among the fallen Verax and stared at the destruction a single human had caused. He had trained his entire life to be a warrior. He had won battles and earned honors and believed himself among the finest fighters in the Empire. He had never seen anything like. Nathan Cole, the Althrani commander, looked at the human soldiers nearby. They did not seem surprised. They had known, he realized. They had known what their people were capable of when pushed to the edge. Kithros thought of every insult he had thrown at Nathan, every moment of contempt, every assumption of weakness. He had been a fool, and he would never make that mistake again. The rescue ships arrived 3 hours after Nathan's assault on the atrium. Human and Althrani warships emerged from hyperspace together, their combined presence forcing the remaining Verax forces to retreat. The attack on Helix Prime had failed, and the galaxy would remember who was responsible. Valara sat in the medical bay of an Althrani cruiser, watching a human doctor tend to Nathan's wounds. There were more injuries than she had realized. Cuts, bruises, cracked rib that he had not mentioned once during the fighting. He sat quietly on the examination table, letting the doctor work without complaint. "You should have said something," Valara said. "About the rib. It was not important at the time." "Not important?" "You could have punctured a lung." Nathan shrugged, then winced at the motion. "I have had worse." The doctor finished his work and stepped back. "You need rest, Mr. Cole. At least 2 weeks of light activity. No combat. No heroics." "I will do my best," Nathan said with a small smile. When the doctor left, Valara moved to sit beside her husband. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the ship's engines filled the silence between them. "Why did you never tell me?" Valara finally asked. "About who you really are. What you can do." Nathan was quiet. He looked down at his bandaged hands, flexing his fingers slowly. "Because I did not want you to be afraid of me." "Afraid?" "I have killed more people than I can count, Valara. I have done things that still wake me up at night. When the war ended, I swore I would never be that person again." He paused. "I wanted our marriage to be built on something better than fear. I wanted you to know the man I was trying to become, not the monster I used to be." Valara considered his words. She thought of the past 6 months. The patience he had shown. The kindness. The way he had never pushed her for anything, never demanded respect or affection he had not earned. "You planted flowers," she said softly, "in my mother's garden. You seemed sad when you spoke about her. I thought it might help." It did. Valara reached out and took his hand, careful of the bandages. "I spent 6 months looking at you and seeing weakness. I thought your kindness meant you were soft. I thought your patience meant you had no fire in you." She squeezed his fingers gently. "I was wrong. You are the strongest person I have ever known. Not because of what you did in that atrium, but because of what you chose not to do every day before that. You could have demanded respect. You could have shown everyone what you were capable of. Instead, you chose to be gentle. You chose to be kind." Nathan looked at her with something like wonder in his eyes. "You are not afraid?" "No, I am not afraid." Valara met his gaze steadily. "I am sorry it took me so long to see you clearly." They sat together in comfortable silence, hands intertwined. As the ship carried them toward home, the return to the Althrani homeworld was marked by celebration and ceremony. News of the Verax attack had spread across the galaxy, along with stories of the human who had single-handedly freed the hostages. Commander Grath's surrender had been recorded by station security cameras, and the footage was being watched by billions. Emperor Sinkith requested a private audience with Nathan before the formal reception. Valara accompanied her husband to her father's chambers, curious about what the Emperor would say. Sinkith was an imposing figure, even for an Althrani. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, his silver hair flowing past his shoulders, his eyes carrying the weight of decades of rule. When Nathan entered, the Emperor studied him for a long moment. "I have watched the recordings," Sinkith said finally. "Many times. I confess I did not know what to think." Nathan bowed his head respectfully. "I hope I did not cause offense, Your Majesty." "Offense?" The Emperor laughed. It was a rich, genuine sound. "You saved my daughter's life. You saved the lives of our allies. You defeated 20 Verax warriors alone and then showed mercy to their leader when you had every right to kill him." He stepped forward and placed his hand on Nathan's shoulder. "You have brought honor to my family and to the alliance between our peoples. I only did what was necessary, Your Majesty." "No," Sinkith shook his head. "You did what was impossible, and you made it look easy." He glanced at Valara. "I was worried when you agreed to this marriage, daughter. I feared I was sending you to live among strangers who could never understand our ways." "I understand now, Father," Valara said. "The humans are not what we thought they were." "None of them are." The Emperor nodded slowly. "It seems we have much to learn about our allies. Perhaps that is the true gift of this union." The formal reception that evening was the largest gathering the palace had seen in years. Delegates from across the empire attended, along with representatives from the human coalition. Everyone wanted to see the man who had become legend overnight. Nathan stood beside Valara, greeting guests with his usual quiet courtesy. If the attention bothered him, he did not show it. He smiled politely, answered questions with humble deflection, and consistently turned praise toward the others who had fought alongside him. "Commander." Kithros approached them near the end of the evening. The Althrani warrior looked different somehow. The arrogance that had always marked his bearing was gone, replaced by something more measured. "Nathan Cole," Kithros said formally. "I wish to apologize." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For everything. Every insult. Every assumption. Every moment of disrespect." Kithros pressed his fist to his chest and bowed deeply. "You are a warrior without equal. It was my blindness that prevented me from seeing it sooner." "There is nothing to apologize for," Nathan said. "You did not know me. How could you see what I did not show?" "That is exactly the point." Kithros straightened. "A true warrior does not need to prove himself constantly. He does not answer every challenge or rise to every insult. He waits, he watches, and when the moment comes, he acts." He offered a small smile. "You taught me that lesson. I will not forget it." He bowed again and walked away, leaving Nathan and Valara alone in a quiet corner of the hall. "You have made quite an impression," Valara said. "I did not mean to." "I know. That is what makes it remarkable." They walked together onto a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The twin moons hung low in the sky, casting silver light over the flowers Nathan had planted months ago. They were blooming now, delicate purple blossoms that swayed gently in the night breeze. "I want you to know something," Valara said, turning to face her husband. "I married you for peace, for duty, for the alliance between our peoples. I did not expect anything more." Nathan nodded slowly. "I understood that. I accepted it. Let me finish." Valara stepped closer, close enough to see the small scars on his face that she had never noticed before. "I married you for peace, but I want to stay married to you for different reasons now." "What reasons?" She reached up and touched his cheek. "Because you are kind when you could be cruel. Because you are gentle when you could demand fear. Because you chose to plant flowers instead of proving your strength." She smiled softly. "Because you are the best man I have ever known, Nathan Cole." and I am tired of pretending otherwise." Nathan was silent for a moment. Then he smiled, and it was real and warm and full of hope. "I was always yours, Valara. From the moment we met. I was just waiting for you to want me to be." She leaned up and kissed him. It was their first real kiss, not the formal ceremony on their wedding day, but something true and chosen and free. When they finally pulled apart, Nathan wrapped his arms around her and held her close. They stood together on the balcony, watching the moons rise over the garden. The war between their peoples finally and truly at an end, not because of treaties or politics or diplomatic necessity, but because two people had found each other in the space between worlds and discovered that love, like peace, was worth fighting for.